Cool. So, but before we started this, you wanted to talk about the origins of like
Yeah, I was
the
going to go into
Star
like
Wars universe.
the history of the Star Wars universe. We can probably start, like at the beginning and go up to at least SWTOR. Because I know
Well,
after
you
SWTOR...
said you have questions, so that's what I'm here for.
All right, well, okay, I know, well, or a better way to put it is I'll start with what I know, and then you can fill in all my gaps.
Go for it.
So I do know that the first advanced species that we know of were called like the Celestials, I believe.
Yeah.
And we don't know much about them other than they made a lot of really cool stuff.
That's one way of putting it.
Now the ones that got the little bug eyes, those aren't the Celestials, right? Those are like another...
Those are the Rakata.
The Rakata. Now, the Rakata are the ones that made the Starforge?
Yes.
So what did the Celestials make? I mean...
They kind of, what they did is they made the very first hyperspace gateways. They basically made intergalactic travel possible in a lot of ways.
Okay, so are they...
So here's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
The Celestials were these like mystical beings who actually taught this tribe called the Kwa, and that's literally how it's pronounced, Kwa, Kwa. And what the Kwa did is they perfected, well, I wouldn't say perfected, but they made some of the first hyperspace lanes. Now, what they did is they traveled through the universe looking, other planets and whatnot. And this is like 25 to 30,000 years before, the Battle of Yavin. So,
Right.
long ass time. And what the Kwa did essentially is they found this race of beings called the Rakatan, which were they're not bugs actually, they're amphibious, but that's fine.
They look like bugs.
Okay, and KOTOR, and you'll remember the Rakata from KOTOR 1, and every time you find a star map, or at least most of the time,
Right.
a hologram of them will come up, and you could also go to a few of their temples and a few of the worlds. I forget which world it's on because I haven't played KOTOR and it's been a long time.
There's also at least one side quest I know of in SWTOR where you're kind of disabling one of their ancient things and
Yes,
have a hologram there.
they've left temples all over the galaxy. Now, what the Rakatan did is, basically the Celestials and the Kwa taught the Rakatan how to use the Force because they saw that the Rakatan were highly Force sensitive. So they taught them not only how to use the Force, but how to build like certain technologies. And the Rakatan were like master builders for their time. Like they were able to basically take any bit of technology you could give them and upgrade, take it, remake it, upgrade it, and turn it into something better, essentially. It was very primitive technology for their time, for the time of, this game and
Right.
onward, but for them it was like the stuff. And even some of their technology is relatively advanced, even if you compare it to stuff in this game or even in the films. And basically what the Rakatan did is okay, they learned from them, they learned how to use Force, but here's the thing, there was as the dark side is always there, and it corrupts and all
Right.
that. Well, the Rakatan were actually a very cruel and, very just heartless race. Like these people, they were master builders and they were masters of the craft, but they were not nice. And what they did is they embraced the dark side essentially.
Oh.
And they used their dark side abilities to not only destroy a good percentage of the Kwa, but they founded their own empire. And they were when I say they were cruel, I mean they were really cruel. Like what they did is they built machines that were powered by the dark side of the Force. And what they did is they tunneled through the galaxy to the core worlds, and they essentially enslaved every civilization. Because remember, this was before the Galactic Republic was founded. So what they did is they made this empire called the Infinite Empire. And what they did is they used their dark side abilities. Because remember, there were no Jedi. So they were the only beings who knew how to use the Force in a combative application. So what they did is they literally enslaved everything.
No one could stand up to them.
No, these people, they were, and when I say they were cruel, it's oh my god, these people were horrible.
They
what
made
they
the
did
Sith
is,
look like good people.
I wouldn't quite go that far, but they would they would shock, slaves with Force lightning just for amusement, or they would even kill their own just if they were talking out of turns. These people, they were dicks, essentially. And they ruled the galaxy for the longest time because remember, there were no Jedi, so
Right.
no one knew what's the Force? What is this? What's going on? How are they able to move things with their mind? What's going on? How do we defend against this? They couldn't do anything. So and they ruled. So they basically ruled the galaxy, like everything, or at least the known galaxy, for a long time. They enslaved humans. They enslaved Wookiees. They enslaved Quarrens. Everything. But as you know, nothing lasts forever. So here's what happened. What was left of the Qua and the Celestials, essentially what happened, well, two big things happened. The first one was the Qua and the Celestials discovered that the Rakatan and them were not the only ones born with the Force. They were discovering that beings in the galaxy, aside from them, were born Force sensitive, like, humans, Wookiees, etc.
Right.
So what they did actually is they recruited some humans. They recruited some other species who were Force sensitive and essentially trained them in a combative application. Sound familiar?
Right.
And what they did is they taught them how to make starships. They even taught them how to make holocrons. And essentially, those were like the seed. In a lot of ways, those were like the seeds of the Jedi Order. They made Force imbued swords. They practiced. They practiced Force in a combative application, and they essentially were planning to take back the galaxy. But here's the thing: that what happened, despite and they weren't known as the Jedi. They were actually called the Jedi. Like, there was emphasis on the E.
Oh, okay. I see.
They were called the Jedi. It was like Jedi or something like that. And essentially, but they were very few in number. And the Rakatan, essentially ruled the galaxy. So they didn't know when to make the first move, essentially, because... But then something happened. And you know what happened?
No, actually, I don't.
At some point, a plague went across the galaxy, and it was a plague that only affected the Rakatan.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, it wiped.
They were the only ones affected by it, and all across the galaxy, like the Rakans were just dropping dead. And then suddenly, the galaxy's beings that they enslaved were like, you know what? We could take this back. And then suddenly, these Jedi emerged, and they were able to use the Force in a combative application. And essentially, what they did is they freed the galaxy slaves, and the Rakatan were so few in number after the plague that they essentially took the galaxy back. And it was, they killed like millions of Rakatan and forced them into exile into deep space. And on Coruscant, when all was said and done, the Jedi came up to this band of beings, and they essentially founded the Galactic Republic. And that's basically, and think about it, they essentially, in a lot of ways, the Republic was united by slavery, because all these beings who had almost no relation to each other came together to defeat a common enemy, which was the Rakatan. And essentially, hey, let's work together, let's found a government, let's help each other out, and that's how the Republic was founded. And then the Jedi were essentially all like, hey, if there are any other Force-imbued, beings who would endanger the Republic, we pledge to be at your service whenever necessary. And thus, the Jedi Order was founded.
Right.
And that's essentially how it all happened.
So why'd they lose the emphasis on the E?
I have no idea. Speech changes over the course of thousands of years, I guess.
I forgot that there was a plague that wiped them out. I completely forgot.
Because the Rakatan, maybe, there was a lot of them. And even with the Jedi, it's fun to say.
Yeah, I know, Jedi.
It sounds like a Yuuzhan Vong, Jedi. Because they say it like that, too.
Yeah, they do, don't they? I remember that.
So they were too few in number, but this plague hit. And essentially, wiped a lot of them out, and gave the Jedi and the Republic a chance to fight back. So it's very interesting, and it kind of, in a lot of ways, the Rakatan kind of defeated themselves, because they subjugated so many of these species, and they were just so horrible to everything that they united the galaxy against them, which is kind of like what the Sith do a lot of the times.
Right.
So in some ways, I wouldn't say the Rakatan were the first Sith, but they definitely were the first, example of the dark side working against you.
Naturally, I'm interested to hear your version.
And then they,
of events.
so the Jedi rose to fame because of what they did against the Rakata.
For the most part.
And then, so is there anything between, say, that, when the Rakata fall and when the Republic makes contact with the Sith, are there any, like, really major events, or...
Well, here's the thing. The Republic didn't really... The whole thing that... The Republic fighting the Sith, that didn't really come into play until, you know, the thing with Naga Sadao and Ludo Kresh and all that, during the Tales of the Jedi series. Now, before that happened was the Great Schism between the Jedi. Because, remember, the Sith had to come from somewhere.
Right.
And essentially what happens is, here's the thing. A common misconception is that the Sith were born on Korriban and they found Jedi arts and they taught themselves that, but they taught themselves the dark side. No, that's not what happened. Here's what happened. Okay, so the whole thing on Korriban, that comes into play, but what originally happened was this event called the Great Schism, and here's what happened. So, there was this faction of Jedi that started, you know, embracing dark side ideals, and this was thousands upon thousands of years after the Rakatan thing. So, these Jedi were like, you know, I think we should use the Force to enslave people, or I feel anger, or stuff like that, because, you know, because the dark side's constant. And there was this huge, just devastating war between Jedi, like Jedi versus Jedi sort of thing, you know, or Dark Jedi as they were called. And this war lasted, it's never been too clear how long it lasted, but it's implied that it lasted for like at least like a decade, if not more, probably more. And so what happened was, though, the Dark Jedi, as they were called, were defeated by the Jedi and the Republic. And instead of killing them outright, the surviving Dark Jedi were exiled in deep space. And they didn't go to Korriban, they just literally got inside a ship, hit the button, and just blasted off into the unknown. Because almost no one knew Korriban even existed. And what happened was, this group of Dark Jedi essentially crash landed on Korriban. And on Korriban were these beings called the Sith. And it was basically this primitive species of, you know, these like red-faced beings, and they saw that these Dark Jedi had like powers, like, you know, to do things that they never seen before, and they essentially worshipped them as gods, which is why on Korriban you see so many like statues and stuff of like ancient Sith. They did that because the Sith worshipped them as like, because they were primitives and they didn't know better. They didn't know what the Jedi were. They didn't know anything like that, and the Sith were like, oh hey, worshippers, this is great. So they essentially, you know, subjugated the Sith species, and over the years, the reason, and even in this game, the reason you get the option to play as like a Sith species with Force abilities, well, the Dark Jedi actually interbred with the Sith species, which is why Naga Sadao looks that way, which is why Ludo Kresh looks that way. That is how the Sith started. They were the Dark Jedi exiles from the Great Schism that interbred with the Sith species.
So it's kind of like a mirror of what happened to this Sith Empire. So the Sith have twice been exiled to some unknown planet and built up their strength.
Yeah, first it was Korriban, and then it was what's the planet in this game called again?
Dromund Kaas.
Dromund Kaas, yes. So, you know, because if you read the Tales of the Jedi series, you know, Mark Aurelius, what am I saying? Naga Sadao tries to take over the Republic, the ancient Republic.
Right.
And he fails, and in doing so, brings the full force of the Republic to Korriban, and essentially, you know, screws Korriban over. And the Sith Emperor Vitiate, or at the time he was known as Tenebrae, went to Dromund Kaas with whatever little remained of, you know, Naga Sadao's / you know, Ludo Kresh's / ancient Sith Empire, and had to build up from there. So it's like history repeating itself.
Right.
And remember, Vitiate lived in the time of Naga Sadao and Ludo Kresh, etc.
Right, he's been alive since they got... I mean, he was the one that founded Dromund Kaas, so he's been alive that whole time.
Yeah, he's at least, like, he's over 2,000 years old.
Yeesh.
Yeah, I know. Doesn't do good on your complexion.
No, it does not.
No, so that's basically what happened. And then in the middle of that, in between the events of this game and Naga Sadao, you know, his death, was the rise of Exar Kun during the Tales of Jedi books. Now, Exar Kun was a fallen Jedi who it was essentially your basic, you know, fallen Jedi true to the Sith cause sort of thing.
Now, Exar Kun was before SWTOR?
Say again?
Exar Kun was before this game, SWTOR.
Oh yeah, he
Okay,
was
okay.
before KOTOR.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, he was actually just before KOTOR. If you go play KOTOR and talk to Jolie Bindo, he'll tell you stories of Exar Kun.
Oh, I love that game.
KOTOR takes place. The events of KOTOR actually take place, I think, give or take 100 years after Exar Kun's death. So it's not horribly long.
No, not long at all. And this is 300 years, I think, after KOTOR. So
Something like that, yeah. Actually, it might even be less than 100. Actually, is between KOTOR and Exar Kun's death. Might even be like it might only be like 60.
well, yeah. I mean, if Jolie Bindo had stories, I mean, he wasn't that old.
Yeah. So I want to say 60 years so that's basically what happened. So did I just blow your mind?
A little bit. A little bit. I for some reason I thought Exar Kun was after the Sith Empire. I don't remember why. How?
He wanted their secrets, but he wanted to do his own thing.
Right.
You know, he dug up ancient, Sith talismans and ancient Sith spells and all that, and just did his own thing.
Now, I remember. I think I remember reading about it more from the timeline. I suggest anyone who hasn't. There's a wonderful series that SWTOR made called the Galactic Timeline, I think is what they're called. It's
Yeah.
like 12 episodes made.
Yeah, they were in preparation for this game.
Right, and they're really well done, and they kind of start going back in history, but they stopped at the Great Hyperspace War because I guess they got tired of it or whatnot.
I guess. Well, I guess some things are necessary. Well, I mean, the whole events of this game kind of started with that particular war, so there's
Right.
no real need to go back any further.
But it's a great resource. It's really fun, and of course it's voiced by Admiral Hackett. which-
Of course, and it's very well made.
Yes, it is. So if I'm correct, so after Exar Kun, he fell to his own
He got-
apprentice, didn't he? No,
Huh?
okay. Wait, if I remember correctly, okay, Exar Kun
Yes.
fell and then got really powerful, found the plans for his lightsaber from an ancient Sith plans or something like that.
Yeah.
Then made a whole bunch of thralls.
Masasi.
What were they? Okay, were they mindless slaves or they just followed him?
Do you know about the Masasi or
The Masasi, I think.
little of both?
Okay, so kind of his thralls, but still, he made an army basically, and
Bingo.
attacked the Republic and drove them to their knees, didn't he? I mean,
In a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, he killed several very famous Jedi Masters, and he essentially incinerated Ossus.
Now, if I'm remembering this correctly, he took another Dark Jedi as his apprentice.
Yes.
But that other Dark Jedi eventually went back to the light.
Ulic Quell Droma.
Yeah, Droma, and then Droma fell. He killed his brother, I think.
And then saw the error of his ways,
Right.
and then led the Jedi actually to Exar Kun, which resulted in Exar Kun's defeat.
Okay, so did he defeat him in single combat, or was it just they all collectively beat him?
They collectively beat him.
Okay.
Actually, Exar Kun kind of destroyed himself in some ways, because what his intention was is he hundreds of Jedi were all converging on his location, and he knew he couldn't stop them all by himself. So what he did is he attempted to do this ritual that essentially would allow it. I don't know why he did this, but he essentially decided to do this ritual that allowed him to shed his mortal body. Seriously, you're gonna dance at a time like this? Okay, and essentially, he wanted his spirit just to run rampant through the galaxy. But what the Jedi did is they put up a wall of light, essentially, to block him, and they actually trapped his spirit on Yavin 4,
Oh.
where it remained up until the story. I think it was called. What was it called? Like Jedi Academy. That's what I
Right,
think.
right, because Kip.
Yeah, Kip and Luke.
But Kip was influenced by Exar Kun.
Bingo.
Okay, that one I remember. I actually read the Jedi Academy a long time ago.
Yes.
Okay, so then Exar Kun. Now, wasn't Exar Kun considered one of the greatest lightsaber duelists of not just his era, but I mean, would be one of the greats of all time?
I'd say definitely his era.
Maybe not all time.
Maybe not all time. It's a little iffy.
Oh, okay, I was under the impression he was really good.
Most of his strength lied in his force abilities. He was still an excellent duelist. Don't get me wrong, and I would definitely. I'd actually say he was the best of his era. As far as all time goes, though, I wouldn't necessarily.
That's true. You do have a lot of greats.
Yeah,
a lot of people to
exactly. I
live
mean,
up
you
to.
can only have so many greats.
And then and then Exar Kun. Wait. So no,
Yes.
but that was so we skipped something though because Exar Kun was after the Hyperspace Wars.
Yeah, it goes Hyperspace Wars, then Exar Kun, unless you include Freedom Nad. But his story was so like short, and it didn't. I mean, unless you want to.
I remember the name. I don't remember the person.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah. But I know the Hyperspace Wars was basically like you said. The Dark Jedi were exiled, and then the Republic just kind of forgot about them.
The Hyperspace War. Yeah, well, they were exiled, and then the Hyperspace War.
Right. What I was saying was, yeah, they forgot about him, and then 2 Republic diplomats actually accidentally found Korriban.
Complete accident.
And who was it? It was who was
There were
the one that
two
used
brother and sister. Their names were. Ah, crap! I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either. But the one of the Sith Lords used them to his advantage to gain
Naga
power.
Sadow.
Naga Sadow used them to the advantage to.
He basically used them to convince the other Sith Lords to appoint him Dark Lord and wage war on the Republic.
Right, because they were like, "Oh my God, the Republic are coming for us! Look at
Bingo.
these 2 very intimidating warriors who have come to destroy us." I don't know, like that guy.
Well, I
had
mean, when
to
you
have,
think about it, like when you see beings of a species and of a ship you've never, ever, ever seen before from a part of space you know is potentially hostile. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd be wary too.
right. I mean, but like you look at the picture of those 2, and I'm like, dude, that guy had to have a silver tongue to spin that one, which he
Well,
did. I
he-
mean, from what I understand, he was very,
Oh, he
very
was
charismatic.
Naga Sadow was a master manipulator. Like he was an absolute master manipulator.
So so he convinced them to go to war with the Republic, and the Hyperspace Wars were very, very, very brutal wars.
Very.
They
Several, a lot of people died, and there were several. It was funny though, is it wasn't that long of a war, but it was still quite devastating.
Now, did they have lightsabers at the time of that war? When was? Because I know what the history of the lightsaber was. They originally had them, but they were like attached to backpacks. believe those-
Yeah, belts actually, but yes.
Yeah,
During the Hyperspace War, they were still attached to power packs on their belts.
okay.
Lightsabers without the power packs didn't come into play until Exar Kun's time. Obviously.
Hang on a second. Gotta give a XP boost to my group.
Priorities.
Priorities. Okay. So God, the lightsabers.
But
on the
originally,
belts.
like during the Rakatan Wars and stuff, they didn't have lightsabers. They just used force swords. Straight up swords.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh no, right? Yeah, didn't you say the Sith enjoyed or preferred some sort of like dark saber to the swords?
Well, during Naga Sadow's time of sorcerers and alchemists, they had like this alchemic Sith sword that they used,
Right.
which was kind of like a callback to the ancient swords the Rakatan used to use. In some ways.
Right, and they weren't as powerful as a lightsaber it was. So why did they prefer to use those?
That's all they had.
Oh, they just didn't.
They were
have
exiled to
lightsabers.
Korriban with literally almost nothing.
Okay, I see.
Like all the riches of the Empire in Naga Sadow's time, they got that from their own relative system. Like the Dark Exiles had almost nothing with them. And remember, during that time, lightsabers weren't common, like at all.
So even the ones attached to their belts were not a common. You didn't see fields of Jedis with lightsabers attached to their belt.
Well, I mean, during the time of the Great Schism, lightsabers were literally just coming into play.
Okay, I see.
But remember, the time between the Great Schism and the Stark Hyperspace War is like thousands of years.
Oh, okay. I get it. Here's a good question. Once the lightsabers got the power packs, do they ever run out? Do they need to be recharged?
The sabers do. The power packs don't. That's why they hook them in there. They have to recharge them.
Right. No, I mean, so like Obi-Wan's lightsaber, if he left it on forever, it would eventually die or run out of power or something.
I would imagine.
Because I remember someone saying that they didn't use much power because technically they were a loop. Like the energy would just come in, go out, and go back in.
I mean, they've never depicted anything like that, so it's kind of hard to answer.
Right, that's what I was thinking because I've never heard anything about if they run out or if they need to be recharged.
They don't need to charge them periodically. I know that. Like
So
an average,
maybe like once every 10 years or something.
probably.
And I do know that they can sit dormant for a long time and never lose.
I mean, my phone doesn't last 10 years.
Right?
Would sure improve the warranty, though. I will admit.
All right, hang on. I'm going to go grab a drink and take a pause real quick. If you want to go grab a drink too. So hang on, guys. We'll be right back. Hang on.